The 18th century marked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, creating a major shift in the world's economy by moving away from hand-produced goods. And during that time, business people like Sir Richard Arkwright of Britain were some of the first inventors to construct factories. Factories that relied heavily on mechanized production of goods, paving the way for massive change across the globe. In today's sponsored look of Game Brewer's upcoming 2 to 4 player Arkwright, the card game, I'll be giving you a very brief overview of why this game might interest you, especially if you are already a fan of the original Arkwright from which this game takes its inspiration. Now, in the game, players will take on the roles of entrepreneurs who are going to compete to build the best factories and hire the most skilled workers over 3 total eras, made up of 4 rounds each. And at the end of the 12th and final round, players will calculate their total scores to see who is the winner by multiplying their company's total number of shares by the total value that they've been able to increase their share value to. And like any good Euro-style card game, there are of course a variety of ways to increase both of these values throughout the game. One of the interesting things, and one of the first things you should know, is that like the original Arkwright, there is a fair amount of complexity, and although this is technically labeled as a card game, don't let that fool you. This was definitely made with more experienced gamers in mind, though the barrier of entry has been lowered for those who are interested in getting that Arkwright experience without jumping right into the original board game itself. What's also really interesting here is that after you've had the chance to play the base game here a handful of times, there are about another half dozen or so expert variants that add additional components and change the game's rules and setup, creating even more variability and complexity for players to explore. Now, there are a number of moving parts in this game, so let me attempt to break down just the most important ones to their core fundamental purposes. Each player starts the game with 2 of the game's 4 types of factories, along with an additional development or development card depending upon their place in the game's starting order. These 4 factories will always produce just one and only one of the game's 4 types of goods: food, clothes, cutlery, or lamps, and will be each player's main focus throughout the game. Players will have the opportunity to both level up their starting factories with additional workers, distribution cards, automated machinery, and even quality upgrades, as well as building all new factories that produce those other 2 goods that the player did not start the game with. And how they choose to navigate this is of utmost importance, and that's because throughout each of the game's 3 eras, each type of factory will only produce their goods once each era. So players must spend their actions each turn planning how to manage their factory's output to be as efficient as possible by the time that those factories are ready to produce. And players can see this in advance since each of the goods always produces on the same turn order during each of the game's 3 different eras. And in order to prepare for this, players will have to choose just one of the game's 7 main actions on each of their turns, choosing the action that they believe will best provide them with long-term results. And as already mentioned, these actions do a variety of different things, from building new factories or upgrading existing ones, to employing more workers, automating their production, adding quality or distribution to their goods, and most importantly, purchasing stock in order to increase their in-game multipliers. And once each player has taken a single action and then adjusted the market accordingly, each player's factories will then produce and then sell goods if, and only if, they own a factory of the appropriate type as dictated by the round marker for that turn. So for example, if the marker is on the clothing round, only clothes factories will produce and sell for that particular round. And as I previously mentioned, and also not to confuse anyone too much, there is a moderate amount of complexity on these calculations for what you can sell to Britain, what you can store in your warehouse, or what you can ship to the outside world. But in essence, players are always striving to create factories that can maximize the demand and the value of their goods, while also trying to spend as little money as possible on their own human workers by attempting to automate their factories with machinery instead, as machinery is a much cheaper expense for players to have to manage once production costs are to be paid back at the end of each round. And like any good Euro game, there is a very healthy amount of card play that affects just about everything in the game, with players continually juggling their available cards to best influence each factory at just the right moments. And over these 12 total rounds, players could choose to just specialize in the 2 starting factories that they have, with high degrees of output through manipulating the market board to their advantage. Or they could generalize their approach by constructing all the 4 available factories and selling fewer but more often. And it's really up to the player to decide just how to maximize their share value to their greatest benefit. And all of this just kind of scratches the surface on the depth inside of Arkwright the card game, as there is so much more under the hood than what I discuss here today, including shipping and storing goods, as well as how players must manage the developments on their player boards to better increase output, or acquiring development cards that allow them to break some of the game's normal set of rules. Not to mention the large amount of variance that players can use once they're more experienced with the game. And as always, I'd like to remind you that everything that you saw here today are in fact prototype components. If you have any questions about the game, make them in the comments below. Please go to the Kickstarter page to see all the final pieces of the game, and we will see you guys next time. Hey everyone, if you guys enjoyed this video, please consider dinging the old bell below. That is going to help notify you of new videos that are uploaded to our channel. And as always, give us a like, subscribe to our channel, and please consider watching all of our videos, one of which you can see right here to my left.